what am I going to talk about? I'm going to sort of ramble on for, I don't know, 40 minutes, something like that. I'm going to talk about data. I'm going to talk about certain types of data. I'm going to talk about data that you know and love. I'm also going to talk about data that you might not know about. And I'm also going to talk about computers. Because I know a little bit about computers and I know a little bit about the brain. But first of all, I'm going to turn this on, which now doesn't work. Oh, yes, it does. No, it doesn't. Just, here I am, director of a high-performance computing centre, and this doesn't work. There you go. Okay. So I wander around a lot. Okay. So just bear with me. I'm going to make a disclosure. I am not a medical doctor. And the reason why I say that first off is that about a year ago, I was giving a lecture on blood perfusion of the brain, which is one of my research things. And I gave this lecture to the University of the Third Age. And there I was. I spent loads of time on this passion I have about how does the brain regulate its blood supply, and end of thing, and all applause. Young person, well, not a young person actually, came up to me. I was the youngest person there, but came up to me and they said, I've got this pain in my foot. I wonder whether you'd like to see it. So here's the disclosure. So I'm not a medical doctor, but as I said, my research group, which has grown considerably actually, due to university scholarships, and there's one of my PhD students over there. It looks at pathologies of the brain and using mathematics and computer models. And that's because I'm actually a mathematician. Okay, so with that in mind, you have to bear with me on the fact that I know a little bit about computers, I know a little bit about the brain, and I've actually been learning about data. So let's first define, really, what is a supercomputer? Well, as in all cases, actually, size does matter. Basically, size does matter in this case. Why do I say size matters? Because a supercomputer is just a big computer that can solve a problem that small ones can't. So that means to say that in a few years' time, supercomputers won't really be supercomputers at all. They'll just be the normal computers. And if you think about, who remembers Apollo 13? Yay, fantastic. So the computer requirement on Apollo 13 was about 1/100th of an iPhone. How they ever landed it was just absolutely fantastic. In fact, in Apollo 13, it didn't work. They had to land it by hand. But what I'm saying is that iPhones now have 3-4 cores, 3 or 4 processors. They do huge amounts of things, far more than they did, say, 10 or 15 years ago. So I'm going to forget the super bit, okay? So we just do computers. Now, over the past 15 years, the expansion of data has been exponential. For those non-mathematicians, that means it gets large very quickly. Very, very quickly indeed. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but the exponential function is the fastest growing function, so it's pretty quick. So let's have a look at social media, that Facebook. I say Facebook, it's the only way that I can contact my youngest son. Why he doesn't use anything else? No, you have to contact him with Facebook. I don't particularly like Facebook, but I have to be there because that's the way I contact him. And I'm going to come back to social contact later on. In 2012, I have to say this now because I can't remember the data, but you can just read it. 2012, Facebook's system processed 2.5 billion pieces of content, 500 terabytes. I'll tell you what a terabyte is in a moment. And each day, so it's 500 terabytes per day, and it's pulling in 2.7 billion like actions. Don't know whether, who knows what a like action is? Oh, it's quite a few of you. All right. 300 million photos per day, and scans 105 terabytes of data every 30 minutes. That was in 2012. Terabyte. A terabyte is 10 with 12 noughts on the end of it. Much, much bigger than my salary. Thank you very much. 100 petabytes of data. What's a petabyte? A petabyte is 1,000 terabytes. Just to give you an indication, we actually have an archive system here at the University of Canterbury under the supercomputing unit that stores a petabyte. And that's quite large. We do it on tape. It's relatively large, but in Facebook, it's not large. 100 petabytes of data stored in a single Hadoop disk cluster. Now, don't worry about Hadoop. It's just a way of storing data so that you can manage it a lot easier. Yeah, 1,000 terabytes a petabyte. Large, big, huge. The Douglas Adams universe definition. It's so big you can't imagine where it is. Facebook's data centers in 2012, I think they've got a couple more, were in California, Virginia, Oregon, North Carolina, and funnily enough, Sweden. Now, we don't think that there is a Facebook data center here in New Zealand, but there might be. The point is that it's everywhere. So the data, parts of your Facebook data, may be in Oregon, it may be in Virginia, could even be in Sweden. It certainly isn't where you think it is. Data for 2015, I haven't got a clue. I couldn't find that easily. So, but anyway, you can think about how big that is. This is just 2012. Health data. Now, health data is very important. Why? Because it's about our health. Inter-eye data. I'll explain what inter-eye data is in a moment, but I'll just say it's a standard data set that is utilized to study and provide clinical decision-making processes for the elderly and the infirm. And we know that the elderly population, the percentage of the elderly population is growing. Thank goodness, we're living longer, that's wonderful. We want to live longer in a nice environment. That's what inter-eye data is. Smart watches. Has anybody got one of those smart watches that you wear that you say how many steps you've taken during the day? Anybody done that? Yes, okay, fine. We'll talk about that in a moment. Wearable tech, weather data. So the Met Service, the wonderful Met Service, much, much better than the Met Service that we used to have in the UK, i.e. actually gets it right for now and again, provides quite a lot of local information, and also there's a huge amount of compute resource to try and understand global weather patterns, such as El Nino. Spatial data. The idea about demographics, the idea that there's a group here, there's a health data group here called the Geographic Health Unit. And they look at huge amounts of data that decides the demographics of New Zealand. There's huge amounts of data involved. Suddenly realised I haven't got a parking permit. Okay, and music data. Spotify. Who knows what Spotify is? Yes, mostly young. Yeah, okay. We talk about Spotify as well. Okay, health and a smartphone app. Meaning that there are phones, things that you can put on your wrist, very small, and they provide a whole series of data about you, about your health, about how fast your heart is racing, about whether you're going to catch the bus, about how far you've walked, what your blood pressure is. They've even got a wrist watch that you can take off, just put a pin like that, take your glucose. Pretty good. Pretty good. Okay? So it was a technology to help address your individual health and your fitness. Now, in the US, about 1/3 of smartphone users, that's about 46 million users, accessed apps in the fitness and health category by January 2014. So we're probably looking at about 60 million users in the US alone, which is a significant portion of their population. And I go to the US quite often, and I must admit, given the serious weight issue that they have in the US, this might be an advantage to them. It might not. Interestingly, I don't know whether you can see this. This is a piece of data that was done by Nielsen, which is a data generation company, and 52% of that 46 million users are women, and only 48% are men. I'll leave that piece of data just in your head there. More women use these smart apps than men do. And funnily enough, the majority of users are aged between 25 to 34, where those of us, and I have to admit I am over 55, are the smallest. When one would think that really they should be the majority of the users, but at the moment they're not. So, the plethora of data that's go on. Spotify. What is Spotify? For those who don't know, and I've only just found out a couple of weeks ago, is the following. It's a database of music that you can download music for, and you can listen to it, and effectively, correct me if I'm wrong, you borrow it. You borrow a bit of music, say, okay, I want to listen to Taylor Swift. Oh no, I can't listen to Taylor Swift because she's just removed herself from Spotify. So I listen to the Stones. Okay, brilliant. And you listen to the Stones. Now, when you download the Rolling Stones or a track from the Rolling Stones, Spotify knows a lot more than just the fact that you've downloaded the Rolling Stones. So much so that with their new terms and conditions, they did the following. They said the following. With your permission, we may collect information stored on your mobile device, such as contacts, photos, or media files. Notice such as means to say they haven't listed everything. Oh, by the way, who's got Apple stuff? Who uses Apple here, an iPhone, anything like that? When you download the app, do you actually read all the terms and conditions? No, you don't. Well, it turns out that this caused a huge furore because they were going, wait a minute, what do you mean you're going to take this data? Whose data is it? Is it mine? Is it yours? Well, the CEO of Spotify tweeted, because he has to do that, doesn't he? He tweeted the word sorry. That's the new terms of service of Spotify. I'm giving you these sort of examples basically because I don't think it's happened to the health environment yet, but I'm pretty damn sure that it's going to. Oh, by the way, I shouldn't say damned. You're not allowed to use the word damned on Facebook. It was taken off recently. Turns out that Spotify stores your credit card info, your Facebook posts, shares the data with payment processors to effectively fire adverts at you, which it does. You use Spotify, fires adverts at you. But that's the only way that it actually makes money. And it makes money from this, what's called free information. Information that you don't know, or that you, if you didn't read the terms and conditions right down to the fine print, is actually being sent back to Spotify, Facebook, anything you like. Health and the smartphone app. A consumer-friendly, mobile personal healthcare product that are connected through the cloud. Come on in. I hate the word the cloud. What the heck does it mean? To me, it means water vapour that's occurred on a turbulent air and makes really nice pictures, and also introduces the Simpsons. That's the cloud, I think. Have you not seen the Simpsons?
No. Who are they?
Exactly. You threw me off there. And you go, okay, so where's this data held then? What do you mean the cloud? But, you know, what is it? Well, it's held in the cloud. What are you talking about? Of course it's just held in the cloud. I've heard people answer my question, so where is it? They go, it's in the cloud. And of course you realise I haven't got a clue where it is. Where's that? Where is it? Does anybody know where it's put up in the air? No, mate, it's not actually. No, you're wrong, it's not in that cloud. Where's that? I'll tell you where it is. It's probably in some data centre. Who's seen that awful film Transcendence? Okay, I better explain it. Big data, big, huge data centre. Lots and lots of spinning disks. Like, you know, that's where you store data, by the way, on spinning disks or on tape. You don't store it in the cloud. The cloud is just a data center, just like it was in Sweden or Virginia or Oregon. That's where it's held. That's what they mean by the cloud. It was a brilliant piece of advert. They should call it cloud. We don't have to tell anybody where it is. So who owns the data? Don't know. Bring on the lawyers. And what is it being used for? Well, I've given an example about Spotify. My thing is, well, I think we ought to start asking some questions. I think it's about time we actually had a debate and started to read maybe all those terms and conditions and say something about, hang on, this is data that I'm giving you, I pay for the app and you're using it for free to make money. Doesn't quite equate with me, and I think we need to start asking ourselves about what we can do. Hidden data. So this is IDC, this is some data from IDC. IDC is a company that does a lot of questionnaires and data collection. This is the total technological industry operating profit share by year. And I want you to just think about the red bit. The red bit is mine and automate, meaning that it has all this wonderful data and it starts to mine it and analyse it. Analyse it in a way that, I think a few years ago, I'll tell you about that in a moment. 250 to 300 billion, what's that? $50 billion is being spent just in 2007 on mining, i.e. analysing all the data that's going through all these applications and iPhones and bits and pieces. Huge amount. I'm going to tell you the story about this mining thing and analysing data. A few years ago, a person in America who had a young daughter got a letter, and he shouldn't really have opened the letter, but the letter was an advert for your new arriving baby. Because he went spare. And he went to his daughter, and he said, what is this? And she had to tell him she was pregnant. And the reason why they sent that particular piece of advert was that they guessed that she was pregnant because she was beginning to buy certain hand products that were, the sort of hand products that don't contain very much. I can't remember what they're called. And by changing her habits of buying, they recognised that she was pregnant. Amazing what you can do with data. 50 billion worth of data mining. That was in 2007. Now I'm going to change the subject a little bit because we're going to go back to supercomputers. Who knows about Jeopardy? Ooh, very few. So Jeopardy is a TV game. Because it's a TV game, I've never watched it. But it is a TV game where instead of you giving an answer to the question, the answer is given and you have to provide the question. It's really sort of neat. So IBM, International Business Machines, decided that they would build a supercomputer that was smart enough to win Jeopardy. Well, typical IBM, they didn't go for the small one, they hit it really big, and they said, we will beat the 2 finalists of Jeopardy with our Watson supercomputer. Built by IBM, 2011. It thrashed them. Now, why did it do that, and why am I talking about it? Because it was basically a big database with a very neat interface, meaning that it could look at all of, oh, by the way, it swallowed the Encyclopedia Britannica, it swallowed just about every printed item that was in electronic form anywhere in the world. It had huge amounts of clinical data with it. And it could basically interpret, this is a neat interface, it could interpret the answer that it could interpret the answer of the question, so it would give what the question was. And it thrashed, it beat everybody. Now, funnily enough, in 2011, it was a computer that had the power of about 80 teraflops. What's that? That's 80 with 12 noughts on the end, operations per second. Turns out, that wouldn't even make the top 500 supercomputer list. In fact, we've got a supercomputer at the university here that if you added it all up together, it's about 75 teraflops. So it's not big. And yet it beat Jeopardy. Alright? So what? Big deal. Beat a TV game. Why was it called Watson? Anybody guess why it was called Watson?
Elementary, my dear Watson. Elementary, my dear.
Nice answer, but unfortunately, bong, incorrect. It was called Watson because of him, Thomas J. Watson. Thomas J. Watson, a little bit of history, he left his first job, he was a teacher, I don't think he was a very good teacher, and he became a salesman. Turned out he wasn't a very good salesman either. But then he had a butcher's shop. He had a cash register at the butcher's shop, and he thought this was really neat. He had to do a lot of bits and pieces and adding up and subtracting. And someone came in and said, you were a salesman, you got this butcher shop, why don't you become a salesman with me? You can sell cash registers. So he said, okay, I'll do cash registers. And in 1914, a company called the Computing Tabulating Recording Company, which employed about 1,300 employees at the time, said, Thomas, we want you to work for us, and we'd like you to sell all these tabulating machines. He said, okay. In a year, he was president.
Did he get a terabyte for a salary?
Interestingly enough, in 1944, you can tell I'm a nerd, can't you? Because I know this. In 1944, he was paid the highest salary of anybody in the world. He was paid $500,000 US in 1944. He died in 1956, and he basically took CTR and turned it into IBM. It is probably the biggest computer companies in the world. That's why they called it Watson. I think they should have done elementary Watson, but that was IBM. So what does Watson do now? Why have I gone to Jeopardy territory? Now, we know that IBM is a business because it's called International Business Machines, and it needs to make money. So what Watson does now is it sells time to clinicians. And it does so because it has a large health database. And what it can now do is you can log on to Watson and you can say, I have a patient with these symptoms. Can you please help me? And Watson will come back and it will say, think it might be this, this or this. Why don't you try this? So it's providing a halfway house to diagnosing and helping those who are unfortunately ill. And it makes a lot of money. So it provides diagnostic tools, and it's a computer that helps tell you what's wrong with you. Really? Possibly. Because we have a problem.
Oh no.
You always have a problem. Come on, I'm a mathematician.
Houston, we have a problem.
So Interact, I told you about Interact. Interact is this, well, what is it? This is from their website. An international collaborative program to improve the quality of life of vulnerable persons through a seamless, comprehensive assessment system. Now, the Interact questionnaire, it's about 250 questions, there's several sections, is all about people who are elderly and may require help, those who are vulnerable may require help, those who are chronically ill. And New Zealand is one of the founder members of Interact. And it provides a huge amount of data for those people who cannot, for one reason or another, help themselves. It's standard over a number of countries, meaning to say you get exactly the same questionnaire in Canada as you would do in New Zealand. And at the moment, the Ministry of Health has a 50,000 patient data set. Why do I know that? It's because at the moment I have a student who works with Interact data. He's using the supercomputer to look at patterns of health and to provide important information to clinicians and gerontologists. Canada has about 300,000. Next year, we'll probably have another 20,000 patients on the data set. So the data set's increasing. And it's informed by trained personnel. There would be a nurse that will come and visit this person along with probably the GP, someone else. And they will go through these question lists and you get this huge amount of data. Very important data. Data that we clearly need to make very, very important, difficult clinical decisions about those who are vulnerable and those who are elderly and need help. And chess is a scoring system. It's not a very good scoring system and we want to improve it, but it's really changes in health, end-stage disease, signs and symptoms. And what does it do? It helps to understand, when you look at the score, it actually helps us to look at how we can change mortality rate. If you have a high chess score, then the data seems to show that your mortality rate is greater. And that means to say that if your chess score is the order of 4 or 5, then there is something that we can do. Well, there is something that the clinical regime can do. And that's important. That's a good use of health data.
What's the score for a dead person?
I beg pardon?
What's the score for a dead person?
What's the score for a dead person? I don't particularly think that's a relevant...
Well, you said 4 was a bad number, but would 3 be a better number or would 6 be a better number? See what I mean?
No, I don't. Actually,
Well, what's
the score is between 0 and 5.
Fine.
Clearly,
Yeah.
clearly this data is for people who are alive.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So I think that on the basis of what I said so far, computers can help. But do they save lives? They don't. We do. It's us that makes the decision. Us as a human community makes that decision because we interact. And we interact in a whole variety of different ways. Some of the younger generation interact differently. I'm sure if you went around the university, you would see how the young people interact. They interact like this. Sorry, they don't. And we make those choices on the basis of social mores and some sort of moral basis. This idea that when we make choices about our health, we do them on a moral, basis. We have some sort of idea about what we need to do about our health, about our own health, about the health of our own families. Now, why can't a computer do this? Okay? we should know, if you think a computer is a brain, I'm afraid you're very wrong, because it's not. And the converse is true, is that, of course, the brain is not a computer. Well, certainly not in the way that we define a computer. We define a computer in a certain mathematical definition, which is quite rigorous. So why can't we do this decision about our own health? Well, computers can certainly learn, as I said, learn-ish, and they learn in some cases by what's called neural networks. Now, what are neural networks? Neural networks are effectively a series of inputs, and I'll describe a possible scenario in a moment, a set of what are called optimization procedures, meaning to say they want to reduce the error between what the output is and where you want to get to. And most smart devices use them. Driverless cars, they use them because they've learned to drive effectively by using a neural network, and you iterate through and it learns that it's not a good idea to drive through a red light, or it's not a good idea to knock someone off their bike. Being a biker, I can certainly recommend not being knocked. And as I said, most use this optimization procedure to increase the weighting, i.e. how much of this bit of optimization procedure should I use compared to this in order to get what I want, i.e. please don't drive through a red light. Unfortunately, neural networks sometimes work out where they work, but they don't know why they work. Well, they work-ish, meaning to say that you really don't know what the algorithm is that makes the inputs into the outputs. Health data can use neural nets, they can use smart devices, and they can decide on a variety of areas. They might suggest a prescription based on certain symptoms, and they might run quick diagnostics and give you a bit of a hand. Watson, by the way, is not a neural network. But it's all algorithmic, meaning to say that it depends always on some prescribed program. And the program is written, of course, by humans, but it's an algorithm. Okay. Alright, so what's wrong with that? Well, you see, I'm a mathematician. Everywhere I go, it's always got to be maths. So here's the little bit of maths to go. So I'm going to give you an example. The solution must always be an integer, i.e., as I've said, any of the negative or positive integers, which includes 0, by the way. So -3, -2, all the way, anything from minus infinity, which is not really an integer, but you know what I mean, to plus infinity, which is again not really an integer, but large figures, large numbers. It can be anything, as long as it's an integer. Now, if you treat w, x, and y, and z to represent any integer, can we find the integers that are represented by x, y, z, and w that make all of these equations, when you add them up, do them, always 0? Well, you can. There's a solution. Check it out if you like. If w is 1, x is 1, y is 2, and z is 4, you substitute them in those equations, and hey presto, you'll always get 0. So that's a solution. Now, I'm going to change one of these equations very slightly. I'm going to make that -4 into a -3. And we could be here until the end of the universe, and we would not find an answer. There is no answer, i.e., no integer, however big or however small, will solve this. Don't worry, we'll tell you how to do it, because that's the whole point of it. We can do it, but a computer can't. So what do I mean? This is one of David Hilbert's 10 fundamental math problems. David Hilbert was a mathematician back in the early 20th century. There is no computer program which decides yes or no systematically as to whether a Diophantine equations, which is what they were, they're a special type of equation, has a solution. There is no algorithm. You can't write a program to do it. So if you gave it these last 3 equations, you said, could you please find a solution, it would churn on and on and on and on and on. And it would never come to an end because there is no algorithm to do that. And it was proved in about 1974 by a Russian mathematician. But we can. And I'll prove to you where we can, because we're going to do it. You want to know how to do it? Let's look at, you should remember, in the last equation, there was a thing called W squared, it's W times W, minus W. Okay? Now, whatever the value of W, well, W squared minus W will always be an even number. Think about it. W squared times W is W times W minus 1. So they're consecutive numbers. And consecutive numbers multiplied together always are even. And if W squared minus W is even, but 3, remember I made the minus 4 into a minus 3, means to say 3 is odd and there's a contradiction because all the others are even. All the other coefficients are even. Computer wouldn't be able to do that, but we can. So how can we make these intuitive leaps? How can we do this? Solve this problem. Go, there's no solution. Just prove there's no solution. And the computer's still churning away, just substituting numbers till the universe blacks out. How can we do this? Haven't got a clue. Don't know. Don't know how we can do it, but we can. And that, I think, defines the human race, depending on the human race compared to computation. And in trying to understand the difference between humans and computers, it's great fun. Isn't it, Tim? Great. I will give him $5 for that. It's fascinating to find out, and that's why we're a research group, and that's why we do what we do. Stop. So if we are different, and we certainly are, I don't think there's any doubt that our faculties, our brain, the idea about sentience, the fact that we can do this, meaning I'm reading a sentence in my head and you can't hear me, I have an inner monologue. If we're so different from computers and we need to make decisions about our health, our data, our lives, then perhaps it's time to say, hang on guys, let's just chill out and think about this for a while, shall we? Let's go back to the terms and conditions and say, no, that's not acceptable. I don't want you to use all that data and make profit for it without me having some idea about what it's used for. Ian McEwan's has just written a book called The Children Act. And it's really about reason and religious beliefs. But it's an example about how you have to make these moral choices that you can't leave to some computer algorithm. So the UK Children Act was first written in 1989, it was amended in 2004, and it's really an act of Parliament in the UK that provides for the well-being of children, those people who are under the age of 18. And it provides provisions for the social services, the clinicians, and it also provides provision that you really should give support of this child, really should be support in the family. So the book is about a judge And the judge, she works in the family court, and she's given a particular job to do. The boy is about 2 or 3 months from the age of 18. He unfortunately has leukemia, and if there is no clinical input, he will die. And because he's under the age of 18, he cannot make the decision about his clinical well-being. He can't make the decision. He is a minor. So his parents make the decision, or they want to make the decision. But their decision is to allow him to die because their religious beliefs are such that they do not want him to have a blood transfusion. Okay, that's fine. But the clinicians, in having signed and worked to the Hippocratic Oath and with the Children Act, then say, hang on, the Children Act states that we need to provide the best care for this young person. And the judge has to decide. So on the one hand, the parents who have this fundamental and religious belief, and they have every right to do that, say, no, we cannot have blood transfusion. We would much rather let our child die and go to God. And the young boy himself, deeply religious, is saying, I don't want to have the blood transfusion. And the judge is sitting there and trying to decide. It's an incredibly emotive book, written by one of my favourite authors, Ian McEwan. And it places before you the idea about the moral judgments that you should make about your health, and the fact that the judge is not a computer. You're probably wondering what decision the judge makes. Does the judge decide for the clinicians or the parents?
And the child.
So let's have a show of hands. Who would, in this small example that I've given, provide for the parents? And who would provide for the clinician? About half and half. It's amazing, isn't it? I think you should read the story.
What would you do?
That's an interesting question. I knew somebody would ask that. My hand would be with the Children Act, because it is primarily for the good of the child. Even though the child themselves, mature though he seems, is still a minor. Now, I really can't tell you the rest of the book because you really do need to read it. And it is incredibly emotive. It doesn't matter what the ending is. What I'm just trying to say is, those are the decisions that we, as a human community, have to make. Would we be happy with a computer making the decision of Fiona May, who is the judge? I will tell you, because it's only half of the book, the judge makes the decision on the basis of the Children Act and allows the clinicians to forcibly provide a blood transfusion. That's about halfway through the book. So, I am promoting Ian McEwan because he's a brilliant author, but you need to read that. But I think you get what I mean. So where do we draw the line? Where do we want our health data to be used? How do we want it to be used? How do we actually say about our own health data, enough is enough, I don't want this to be used here? Because if you go to a smartwatch app, and you read their terms and conditions, you're sucked in. Because if you don't agree to their terms and conditions, you don't get anything. If you do agree to their terms and conditions, you feed them with a lot of data you might not know about. So, if we have driverless cars, as we do you think we should have doctorless surgeries? Well, it depends on your doctor, I suppose, doesn't it? But it's a question that I think we should ask, principally because I can see a time when Watson would appear in your surgery. If we allowed technology to embrace all. So, what is the future? Come on, you weren't even born when that film was made. Who remembers this? Yes. Is this the future that we want? Do you remember Hal from 2001? In the end, of course, Hal kills the astronaut, but allegedly. But in Stanley Kubrick's imagination, everything was weird. So, remember Hal? Okay, so if you just do a right shift on the letters H-A-L, what do you get? IBM. So is this what we want? I'm not going to provide an answer for you, but it would be great if you just went away and thought, maybe I ought to read those terms and conditions. Not that you can do anything about it at the moment, but you might be able to in the future. We're social animals. And my own feeling about technology and how it evades us, especially in the health area. About 1958, another of my favourite authors, Isaac Asimov, wrote a short story called The Naked Sun. And this is about the Solarians. The Solarians are on this planet about 3,000 years hence, and they live in these vast estates. And their social attitudes and their mores are such that they reject interaction. They reject face-to-face confrontation. They can't go up and do this. They can't touch you like this. It's against everything that they consider. How do they live? They live because they have robots and computers doing everything for them. And really, even in 1958, Asimov realized that there was a possible confrontation going on here. That the full substitution of automated services against social interaction. Do you know, I've been speaking to a lot of gerontologists over the past 6 or 7 months, and I say, what's the most important thing that's not in the chest score that predicts mortality? And he said, social interaction. The idea that we are humans that require face-to-face interaction. And possibly as a consequence of this ever-increasing, this exponential growth of data towards, as Marshall McLuhan said, this all-embracing technology. Maybe that was similar to what he said in a small book he called The Media is the Message. Unintended consequences. Meaning that, yeah, let's embrace this health data, let's do this technology. And then 10 or 20 years later you go, oh, that wasn't really such a good idea, was it? So maybe we need to stop and think. Oh, goodness me, look at the time. Come on, we save lives. Humans save lives. Computers don't. And we need to understand that. We need to understand that computers are extremely helpful, but sometimes they're not. Thanks for putting up with me. There are 2 people that I want to acknowledge. Hamish from the Aging Health Group. He's the gerontologist down at Princess Margaret. He's a great guy. He's taught me huge amounts about the elderly and the infirm and what he does. It's fantastic. And also thanks to Robert, who gave me some insights into data and Marshall McLuhan. Thanks very much for listening. Thank you.